interesting verse, this. Those who are at ease have contempt for misfortune, as if it were the fate of those whose feet are slipping. Job chapter 12, verse 5. Did you know there is good evidence that the book of Job was originally written as a play? That is the very best way I have found to understand it, and still Job's play, Job's book, haunts me on several levels. To begin with, in the very first act, God makes a bet about the integrity of a human being. In case you don't know the story, let me tell you kind of how it goes. See, the members of God's holy court all gathered together for a council meeting of such. And among those who are present is the Satan, or the adversary. So God says to the Satan, "Have you seen my servant Job? I don't think there is another man like him on the face of the earth. He's honest and righteous. He reveres me and he avoids evil." And the Satan says, "Oh yeah? I bet I can cause Job to curse you to your face." And God says, "I'll take that bet. You can have all power over Job, just don't hurt him." So the Satan, this adversary, goes to work. And in the course of just one short day, Job loses 500 pair of oxen, 500 female donkeys, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, all but 4 of his servants, and all of his children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. Well, without doubt, Job is grieved beyond limits. He tears his clothes, he shaves his head, and then he throws himself down on the ground to worship. He says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return there. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Well, next day, all the divine beings come together again, and God says to the Satan, "Have you seen my servant Job? I don't think there's another man like him on the face of the earth. He's honest and righteous. He reveres me and he avoids evil." And the Satan said, "Oh yeah? I bet I can make Job curse you to your face." And God says, "I'll take that bet. Job is yours. Just don't kill him." So the Satan, this adversary, goes to work, and Job is struck by horrible, terrible, seeping, weeping, pussy, painful sores from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. He sits down in a pile of ashes, and he scratches his skin with a piece of broken pottery, because it seems like that's all that's left for him to do. His wife says, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" But Job refuses to curse God. Even though he's lost everything, even though his own skin rebels against him, he refuses to curse God. Well, about this this time, 3 of Job's friends decide that they will go comfort him. When they see him at a distance, they don't recognize him because he is so mangled and pathetic. And they begin to weep and to wail. They tear their clothes and they throw dirt on their head as a sign of their great sorrow and sympathy for this their friend. And then they do the most extraordinary thing. These men sit down with Job on the ground, on a pile of ash. And they don't say a single word. Not a word. For 7 days and 7 nights, they just sit with Job in his excruciating pain. But on the 8th day, Job speaks. And when he speaks, he begins to express his deep agony. And his friends rebuke him. They tell him it's all his fault. They blame him for everything that happened to him. If he had just made better life choices, if he had been more righteous and less evil, then none of these bad things would have happened to him. They say to Job that this is according to God's judgment. He deserves his great misfortune. He deserves his terrible loss. He deserves his horrible, horrendous heartache. And he should be ashamed of the way that he's lived. And Job says to his friends, those who are at ease have contempt for misfortune, as though it were the fate of those whose feet are slipping. In other words, when people are comfortable, they don't want to hear about or look upon or be confronted with the misfortune of others. Because misfortune is obviously the fate of reckless living, right? When we sit in our comfort, we're terribly uncomfortable by the misfortune of others. You could say we even have contempt for it. We scorn the hardship and the calamity of some folks. In fact, we sometimes scorn people living in calamity and hardship. And we judge for certain, just like Job's friends, that some folks have no one but themselves to blame. If they had been more righteous and less evil, if they had made better life choices, then they wouldn't experience all of the bad things that they experience. Of course, it goes without saying that we are all responsible for our own lives. It's just a fact. We are. And the decisions we make about the way we live can harm us or help us. No mystery there. But a problem arises when we, in our comfort as a result of our good choices, have contempt for those who are in discomfort due to their bad choices. I'm guilty of that contempt. Oh man, I try really hard to keep my nose out of the book of Job. But I've been reading it. And as I read it, this verse slapped me in the face. Those who are at ease have contempt for misfortune, as if it's the fate of those whose feet are slipping. I am guilty of that contempt. We are guilty of that contempt. So this week, I've been looking at our passage from Mark. It's a really short passage, but within it, Jesus is just all a bustle. Did you notice? He's healing people left and right, and he's preaching the good news like nobody's business, because, well, that's what he's all about. As he says, that's why I've come. In this brief little text, we see him heal Simon Peter's mother-in-law, and then he heals other people who are sick. He liberates the demon-possessed, he cures diseases, he drives out evil spirits, and then he just moves on. He goes on to other villages so that he can do the exact same thing. Heal people, lift them out of their misery and misfortune, tell them and show them the very good and perfect and loving will of God Almighty. That's what he does. That's just what he does. Because that's what Christ was anointed to do. Well, I got to wondering this week. What would happen if the person who wrote this play about Job wrote the character of Jesus into one of the acts? If Jesus, strolled up on that ash heap where Job and his friends were sitting, not when they were sitting in their silence, that's a beautiful picture, but when they were lambasting poor old Job. What if Jesus had walked up onto that scene? How would he respond? What would he say? Well, if we rewrote the play to fit within the context of our modern time, maybe Jesus might say, like, Job, you got to face facts. You deserve what's happening to you. If you hadn't ingested all those drugs, you could think your way out of this mess. If you hadn't drank all that alcohol, you would still have your health. If you would eat right and exercise, you wouldn't have a heart condition in the first place. If you would stop smoking, you could get off of that oxygen. I'm sorry you're cold and hungry, but if you would stay on your meds and get a good job, you wouldn't be homeless. If you weren't unfaithful in your marriage, you wouldn't be lonely right now. If you hadn't been such a poor parent, your children wouldn't hate you. If you hadn't been so careless with money, you wouldn't be in this financial situation. If you hadn't broken the law, you wouldn't be in jail. I wish I could help you, buddy. I really wish I could. But we both know this is all your fault. You should have made better life choices, and you didn't. And now you're just going to have to pay the price. You're going to have to face the consequences. See, I just can't hear Jesus saying those things. Nowhere in the Gospels do I pick up on Jesus saying those things. I've heard myself saying those things. Definitely hear society saying those things. I've heard us saying those things. But it's the thing that Job said that brings me back to the way that Jesus responded to suffering. Those who are at ease have contempt for misfortune, as if it's the fate of those whose feet are slipping. It's that contempt. It's that contempt for discomfort that I felt in my comfort that convicted me. And that calls me back to Christ and to the mission of Christ's church. You know what the Holy Spirit said to me this week? I was like, la 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 la, not gonna hear it. But what I heard was, the church isn't in the business of diagnosis. You know what I mean? We aren't the doctor. We're the pharmacy. It's not up to us to say, this is what's wrong in this situation. We don't make the diagnosis. Our purpose is to apply the healing ointment that Jesus has prescribed. And that ointment is the good news of God's tremendous love. Pope Francis has said that the church should be a field hospital on the edge of a battlefield. I've had that on a sticky note since, 6 months after I got here. It's posted on my bulletin board. If ever you need to read it, walk in the office and call me over and say, Pastor, let's read this together. The church should be a field hospital on the edge of a battlefield. He said, the thing the church needs most today is the ability to heal wounds. Perhaps nowhere else is our mission more loudly proclaimed to us than at that very table. The broken bread and the blood of Christ that's poured out for the healing of the world. It reminds us that as followers of Jesus, we are called to love and to heal the world as well. We receive these holy elements with a commission. And the commission is that we become the very same gift of grace that we receive in these elements at this table. The point is that we are called and anointed just like Christ to preach the good news. And as those who are willing to be a healing balm of Christ, will you join me this morning in the service of Word and Table? Page 12 in your hymnal.